Hello, everyone. Welcome. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm beaming in from beautiful Gadigal land and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. I'm here with my two new best friends, Helen Carter and Charlie Villas. Helen Carter was a writer and bass player with 80s band Do Re Mi, who reached the top 5 in the national charts for the song Man Overboard. In 2019, Helen produced an all-women evolution of Do Re Mi featuring Deborah Conway, Julia Day on drums, Bridie O'Brien on guitar, and Clio Renner on keys. Charlie Villas is one of Sydney's favourite party starters. She brought her A-game and musical prowess to countless parties and events over the years, such as Sydney Gay and Lesbian, Mardi Gras and Mardi Gras Film Festival. She is a proud Filipina and beloved figure in the queer community. My name is Liz Martin, the one with the croaky voice that just started. And I will be your MC interviewer, I guess, for the evening, talking all things Fanny, Fanny the film, the band, and music. And so if you have viewers out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can pop them in the comments section and then I'll pick them up and throw them at our lovely guests here. So feel free to get on involved. So we've all just seen the film Fanny. Helen, when did you first hear about Fanny the band?
Thanks, Liz, and I just want to acknowledge the Bundjalung Nations, which is where I'm beaming in from. Unfortunately, I only heard about them about 5 years ago through friends. So, yeah, like probably a lot of us, we just weren't aware of it, and particularly being in Australia and in the 70s, that just probably wasn't on our radar at all, sadly. But I'm sure glad to know about them now. That film was awesome.
Yeah, and Charlie, when did you first come across Fanny the band?
Well, actually, just through this doco. So it's been an amazing discovery. But yes, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, which are the Bidjigal. I'm on Bidjigal country. So I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. But yeah, so yeah, I've never heard about Fanny before seeing this film, and they're just awesome.
I hadn't heard about them either, actually, to be honest. But I am like a new fan. The film highlights loads of barriers around sexuality, race, gender, back in the late, 1960s and 1970s. By the time we go to the 80s, Helen, had things changed a great deal?
I would love to say yes, it was amazing. We were all terribly liberated, but I think even, I just had a look at the Double J top 50 debut singles chart, which was on today, and there were 33 male bands and 17 female bands. So, and we know the situation that's happening across festivals, and I would like to see that improve, right, because there is a lot of talent out there. But in the 80s, I suppose, I guess the punk of the late 70s did open a lot of doors, so that made it, at least we were sort of seeing ourselves in those videos and in those record stores. Mainly for me, it was seeing album covers in record stores.
Yeah, wow. And Charlie, what about you? How do you find things in terms of barriers around sexuality, race and gender at this time? Do you find it much of an issue? Do you think it's a thing?
I think these days people are very aware and want to be, like doing the right thing, and they're being authentic in curating diverse lineups, and whether it's, just including more POC BIPOC talent, or you know, people of many gender diverse kind of backgrounds and stuff. But like what Helen said, you know, it's like we've come a long way, but in some respects we haven't, because yeah, I saw this thing pop up on social media recently where I'm on this group that's for like sort of it's a Facebook group for a community of female identifying like DJs and producers, and someone had shared a lineup with Ministry of Sound, I think, which is, you know, one of the big iconic nightclubs, and they're a dance label as well. And someone was just pointing out that, oh, hang on, there's no female names on this bill, which is just outrageous. So yes, we have come a long way, but it's like, you know, still got to knock on doors and things. So it's just crazy.
So, Helen, I'm curious, did you, when you were growing up, and you're the bass player, right? When you were growing up, did you see yourself on stages? Like, did you see other women playing? Did you have sort of like female musical heroes when you were growing up that made you think, yeah, I can do this? Or if you didn't, what the hell made you think you could do this?
Yeah. Look, I have to confess that when I was in my late teens, when I first picked up the bass, I was very unaware of everything, basically. So I was quite internalised, and the bass for me was an escape and something that I could really throw myself into. I didn't, in terms of heroes, I was very aware of Suzi Quatro, the Au Pairs and the Slits, the Party Girls eventually after a few years. But I didn't really see myself, and in fact, I became extremely critical of what I did see of women on shows like Countdown, because, well, a bit like what happened in Fanny, you know, basically you just didn't get on there unless you were wearing something skimpy or sexualised in some way. So that made me angry, which actually was a good thing for me to be playing and to be not that person. So I had something that I didn't want to be. In terms of what made me think I could do it, I frankly never had a thought about that. I never had a thought about I can't do it. I just did it. And I mean, again, that's a bit similar to what I think Jean was saying. She just did it, and I guess that's about having the people, the friends, and the people around you who kind of were doing it too.
What about you, Charlie? Did you have like female musical heroes that made you feel like you could do this?
Well, I guess I grew up on a diet of soul and disco. Like, I started collecting records when I was probably in my, I don't know, late teens. So I definitely have like female, like sheroes that have formed my musical tastes. But, you know, I had a few like mentors that sort of nurtured my taste in music and sort of introduced me to DJing and collecting records and stuff. So, but yeah, in terms of like female heroes, I mean, I love Erykah Badu. I think she's just incredible, and I actually also love Betty Davis. I don't know if either of you know of her. She's just the ultimate badass, like, you know, fused like funk and rock and all these sounds together. And so, yeah.
I can never think of her without thinking of that record cover of her with the ball between her legs, just like, yes.
we're kind of we're talking sexualized, but I think in a way that should be very terrifying for anybody who fancied their chances with that person.
Yeah, that's right.
So what about, in the film, it's like, it's interesting because the film is all about, I guess, the difficulties they had being women, and being Filipino women and being queer women. And so many of the questions from journos at the time, and even you could even argue the framing of the film itself was all about, like, what's it like to be a woman in a rock band? Like, people were obsessed and are obsessed with it. Helen, have you ever been asked, what's it like to be a woman in a rock band?
Probably 12,000 times minimum. It just was really frustrating. And I think I've really been contemplating that question after our brief discussion yesterday about the film, that, I guess we couldn't have progress unless we had the problem in the first place. It's kind of doing my head in. But I think back when I was in the public eye back in the 80s, virtually every interview started with, oh, well, how is it? Deb and I would be sitting there and they'd be going, well, what's it like to be a woman in rock? And it was just everything that we could do not to lean over and strangle them, and 99% of the interviewers then were male, and they're doing what they thought was the right thing. But I think Charlie said earlier on, it was lazy. It was kind of lazy journalism, and there was never any talk about my bass playing. I think I did one interview. In 8 years about my bass playing.
Wow. So what?
Maybe my bass playing was shit, and that was I just didn't realise.
What kind of questions would you rather be asked about? This is just for journos out there for future reference interviews. What kind of questions would you you prefer to be asked about?
It's really interesting because I had the absolute blessing of being able to go with Bridie and Deb and Julia and Clio in early 2019 to do some really big shows with By the Sea, and we were interviewed, and hilariously, a lot of the questions a lot of the interviews started with, how did it feel being asked about what it was like to be a woman in rock? Because I think people have kind of woken up now that was probably not the greatest of approaches. But there were a few absolute gems of journalists who would dig down into the emotion of the music and what we were trying to do and why we were doing it. And I think that's probably what I would, they're the sorts of questions I like answering.
It's apparently your I don't know if you saw that, Helen, but apparently your bass playing is not shit.
Yeah.
Awesome. No, I was obviously being facetious. So thank you, Georgie. I can see your comment there. That's fine.
What about you, Charlie? Have you had that question thrown at you? Do people get hooked on certain questions when talking to you about your DJing? Or?
Well, firstly, I'd love to get more interviews. But I think, I've only really been like kind of more interviewed from a perspective of being like a figure in a community, and being like a queer personality or whatever. So the focus hasn't been on the music, but I mean, if it was more, it's been more about my my stance on this issue or that issue. But I mean, I would love to be interviewed about what's about my music tastes, or where I see us, especially coming out of lockdown, where I see the industry heading and where we need to focus on in terms of rebuilding and stuff. So Yeah, come on. Someone interview me.
I sometimes wonder whether it's like an extension of The Voice, you know, that terrible TV show.
Yeah.
And where it's all about the storyline behind the person rather than the music. Everyone kind of gets hooked on who is the person behind and what we need to know about them rather than about music questions.
Yeah.
Well, I think talking, I guess for people to really fully appreciate your music, they do need to know you a bit. I mean, in my day, it was very, you know, I'm the rock star and you were all over there. And it wasn't like now where anybody can just, you know, technology's changed so many things and it's absolutely marvellous in many ways. But I think, yeah, to kind of get some depth to knowing a person rather than just, oh, you're representing a Filipina queer thing. What's that all about? And kind of, that's not depth.
Yeah. We do have a question that's popped through, which is, what's the most badass thing you've ever done on tour?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question.
I'm probably the least badass person here. So it's over to you guys. Have either of you done anything fully badass on tour?
Yeah, lots of stuff, but it's sort of a bit juvenile and boring, really. So I don't know whether it's badass, but being on tour in the 80s seriously was just a deadly game. You know, and I guess for me and Deb, hanging out with not Stephen and Dorland, who were in the band. They were quite the young feminists themselves, and still are. But being around, like backstage at a you know, Save the Daintree or something, with, you got Midnight Oil and you got, you know, all these guys around, very, very blokey, and probably my earliest recollection of doing something stupid was in Bruce Stadium in Canberra, and Peter Garrett said, "Oh, let's go and jump off this thing into it." It was a gym, and there was like a big pile of rubbery shit that you jumped into. And this is before we went on. So, you know, of course, Deb and I went, "Yep, awesome, we're in." The guys said, "Nah, we're not. We're just staying in the dressing room." So anyway, we leapt off this thing, and unfortunately there were some of those blue mats around the edge of it, and I landed with my ring finger on my left hand directly on it, and it immediately like swelled up like totally blue purple. So I'm on stage in 5, righto, okay, so I'm trying to play with which is just very, very stupid.
What about you, Charlie?
Well, I've never really been on tour per se, but I did a gig. Was it last year? I don't know. This year is just a blur to me. I just can't. I don't know what year we're in.
Yeah,
like I feel like it's still 20. Feel like it's still the perpetual 2020. But I did a gig with a crew called Heaps Gay, and it was for the it was a series that was being held outside the St. Mary's Cathedral series of summer concerts. So Heaps Gay are a queer party collective. So they invite, like, you know, different artists and drag queens and bands, whoever, to perform. So this night culminated in the so people from like the Catholic Church community protested on the steps just outside the St. Mary's, and so like the police had to come for us, thank God, like it's like not for them, and then, you know, there was like mums and like kids that ended up showing up, and, you know, people like chanting, you know, the F word, like as in like faggot. And Sydney, that's right, Sydney Festival were putting on this event. It was part of their summer series concerts. And they were like, just before we went on, they were like, look, you know, I just want everyone to like have a really good show. Don't worry about what's going on behind you. Because they were like, they started chanting and, you know, singing all these like religious hymns and stuff. So I don't know. I feel like that was like the biggest badass thing that we did, is just to like, you know, we just did our things and just
hold your ground.
Yeah. And I think I wanted to play Standing in the Way of Control, you know, that gossip song, but I think I ended up playing Like a Prayer instead. So Madonna's. Of course. It's a go-to anthem. So yeah, that just felt so good. Just like kind of having our backs turned to these people who are like, you know, we were just there to like celebrate. And yeah, it was great. I mean, but I haven't done any kind of, I would like to say that I've done some really bad rebellious things on stage or whatever, but I haven't. I'm sure Helen's got lots more stories.
But Charlie, that is amazing to actually stand up for something so passionately and not being, not paying attention to people who don't want you to be there, which is really brave. My stuff was always just a bit stupid, but yours is quite brave.
Yeah, I mean, we did feel really quite, you know, there was like a sense of danger and we're like, what's going to happen? Like, so there's definitely a few performers who was very nervous and, you know, didn't feel comfortable getting on stage, but we were just like, oh, let's get drunk. It's just like, you know, let's just do this. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, so brilliant.
We've definitely got that in common.
Yeah.
What about mansplaining? Have either of you ever experienced any mansplaining in the music industry?
Yeah. Helen, do you want to go first or should I? Because I've got like a million stories.
You've got a list. You go first.
Yeah, go on, Charlie.
I do have a list. So I was doing a gig at the Cricketers, which is like a, you know, cute. It's like a bit of an institution. This cute old pub in Surrey Hills, and I used to play a dance hall night with a friend called Louis, who's a really top guy. Like, you know, he was a feminist. Like, he was just a really good bloke, and he would just always have these like guy friends that would show up, you know, just hanging around. And I was playing, and one of his friends was like, "Oh, your apprentice is pretty good. Yeah, she's a good apprentice." And I'm like, "What? I'm not an apprentice, mate." I was like, "Okay." Just deep breaths, Charlie. And then another time I was playing at Beat a Tit, awesome queer bar in Redfern. I was, you know, people just come up, make requests. Just, you know, it's part of the parcel. So this guy comes up to me and lists like all these like tracks that was like, oh, you know what song would go really well after this? Oh, you know, like this and that and this. I'm like, what? Who are you? Like, oh my God, it's just like, okay, again, deep breaths, Charlie. Oh, and I think another classic story was I was playing a private house party for a friend, and it was like getting towards the end of the night, and there was this guy that just kept coming up to me when I was playing, and he was like, oh, why don't you just like, you know, do a bit of scratching? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And he just like kept coming up to me. And then, you know, like by this third attempt, he was like, he actually touched my gear and like, you know, pretended to scratch. And I was just livid, and I'm sure I overstepped the boundaries. I mean, that was a friend of the host. And I'm like,
You didn't overstep the boundaries. How did you overstep the boundaries? It was that person that came and touched your stuff.
I just got really pissed off at him. But like the amount of times that actually people have, just touch your gear, I'm like, what the hell? So those are 3 classic mansplaining memories.
Oh God! And that actual to reach over and touch your gear is just outrageous.
Yeah, and every single time I think to myself, like, would this happen if I was white, or if I was a man, or if I was like, looked different? Like, it probably wouldn't. Like, so yeah, yeah. There you go.
What about you, Helen? Any little stories from your 80s and onwards?
Well, yeah. I'll confirm that, in my current kind of work in community services, that every time I sit around a table, there's a bit of that going on. But when we were recording a song called Friends Like You, which has kind of got almost a reggae type sort of feel to it, the producer and the engineer, both guys, I was sitting on the couch in the back trying to get this thing right because it was quite complicated for me, and they were leaning right over me like that, and grabbing my fingers and putting them on the strings like this, and I'm going, well, fuck, I can't play if you're fucking grabbing my hand. And that, I didn't know at the time. I just felt upset at the time. But when I reflect on that, I think, wow, oh, fuck, I guess it was just the way it was, unfortunately. But, yeah, that did affect me.
Yeah, I've had heaps of moments where I've been the lead on a project or something. But, yeah, when you were saying, Charlie, about being the apprentice, suddenly you like presume to be the apprentice or the helper or the sidekick. And you're like, no, I'm actually leading. Yeah. And I often wonder too whether that would have happened, whether that happens. Whether it would have happened if I was a tall, male.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it would have been a different conversation altogether. It would have been on an equal footing rather than the patriarchal kind of approach, which unfortunately is where these things are coming from. And I'm sure they're all very well intentioned, but it's about repositioning the conversation. And I think that's, getting back to the film, that that in the beginning parts of the film, I found myself being a bit frustrated because the whole thing was framed around the same kind of conversation, the same women in rock kind of, even from the cinematic perspective, and I think having champions of success, it would have been good if they were successful when they were in their so-called prime. But I loved up towards the end when they were all, saying, "Oh, I might get famous again when I'm 80,"
Yeah.
But I just feel, and I really felt like when I was 30, I was old as a woman in the music industry. It was really hard work to do anything, and eventually, I never had the success that I had in Do Re Mi. But what I really loved about Fanny was that we were able to see them being creative human beings, having gotten through all of that, and that sense of togetherness and belonging that the music created for them, and they created with the music, was really tremendous, I thought.
Yeah, the whole age thing is such a thing too, isn't it, in music world, where it's, if young and emerging, there's an enthusiasm to hear from new people, and a sense of retirement age often. What about you, Charlie? You're how old? In your 70s?
Well, I was born 78, which was a great year in music. Like, lots of stuff happening. But yeah, I mean, I do feel old when I see like the kids that are playing these days. I relish when I finish a gig early, actually. And especially because I'm going to be making a big move out of Sydney. So I'll be commuting to gigs an hour or so, which will be fine. But I'll be like, can I finish at 10 o'clock? But yeah, just going back to the film also, like, it was really gut-wrenching when the drummer was like that they had to make that decision that was made by those two male figures that for some reason they thought, you guys are going to be like the next like Beatles, and we have to make it a 4 and 5. It's like, and so that was obviously like so such a like full on intense thing for her, mate. That's just like, whoa, that kind of broke up the family kind of thing. But yeah, I was glad that she was able to be reunited with her sisters later on, and and I hope that the bass player is able to recover as well, because that was the other gut-wrenching thing in that story.
That was shocking. It was really shocking. It just so cruel for that to happen when things were going well, and they had people around them rallying around them in a support role, not a telling them what to do role, which was very different to the early days. And so, but I mean, I think at the end they said they're planning on touring next year, and the film was made this year, so great. Let's hope.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Thinking about the future for the music industry, you're both aware that the ARIA's announced this year that they're going gender neutral in November. So there won't be any best male or best female awards anymore. The Chief Executive Annabelle Hurd said the change would better reflect equality and diversity in the music industry and afforded artists the opportunity to achieve recognition on an equal platform. The Grammys have been gender neutral since 2012. And since 2013, about 45% of Grammy nominees for Best New Artist Award have been female. But when you look at Record of the Year or Album of the Year, more than 90% of Grammy nominees have been male. And more than 70% of nominees for Song of the Year have been performed by male artists. So I'm wondering about your take on this, and what do you think about this idea of going gender neutral in November and the ARIA's announcement?
Do you want to go first, Helen?
I don't want to touch it, but I think it's a vexed question, really. I mean, I can see that if they are reducing the number of awards, then I don't know how much better it's going to be. If they were having the same number of awards, but with, gender neutral, all well and good, but it's about, I guess, working from the ground up and bringing people, having a diversity of people in the pool in the first place, and then bringing attention to that and having, and I mean, I don't know. The ARIAs are an industry award as well, so I don't know how diverse the industry, the voting, Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I think I really want to wait and see, because we need to see how it's implemented. Like you said, Liz, about the Grammys. Yeah, it's an interesting move, I think.
What do you think, Charlie?
I think that is a tough one, because I agree with Helen. That's how is it going to result in like female talent being overlooked for certain categories. But I guess that's the ARIAs and the music industry, local music industry, just trying to get with the program, and in that, like, there's just so much gender diversity now, and a lot of people don't want to assign a gender to themselves. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I'm non-binary or whatever. So I guess the awards have to reflect that in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? How to find positive ways to move forward, and how to. I just think more awards for everyone. If you're turning up and playing music, you should have an award.
Yeah, and who's on the ARIA board these days anyway? So yeah, that's another good point. Like, is there diversity in the board as well? Because if it's just, and also age diversity as well, like I don't know, different backgrounds.
I think you're right. I think that's really important, Charlie. That because the industry's been stuck in the 1970s for 80 years, but it's just a bit of a generational change. I think will help refresh. Yeah, and what are awards anyway? What are we doing with them? Is it a chance to go out and put your ball gown on, and that's great. We all have a great time. And recognising, I guess, exceptional talent, but then it's all very subjective.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say, Helen, because it feels like, for all its claims of like rock and roll and rebellion and sticking it to the man or whatever music, it feels often really conservative, and like it's been taking a long time to see some real radical change and representation of diversity on stages.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and in fact, if I think about Fanny, I think that would have been just such a shock to the music industry system, which it quite clearly was, and therefore they just got sidelined. But that's the kind of impact that I wanted to have. That I think I think a lot of the more radical alternative musicians are trying to have that kind of impact. I mean, other people just want to come in and go, yep, I just want to get 20,000 Spotify streams, and that's fine with me. And there's not really any other driver. And that's that whole thing about knowing what motivates me, and social justice motivates me. That's what I've been, that's my job. That's what motivated me in music. So, interesting.
Do you think that do you think that audiences are ready for a different kind of landscape of music and music makers and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're living in a world where people are very woke. I guess I live in a bubble, but like, people want their perspectives to be widened, and with social media, you can connect with people from all around the world, and it's incredible. We can see a show that's like happening in Brazil or, you know, wherever, you know, just from your living room. And it's, you know, you're discovering like new talent from, yeah, and on a local level as well. But yeah, I think that audiences want to be, audiences' tastes have, I guess, refined in a way. I guess it depends on what kind of like circles you move in as well. I mean, there's going to be like still like certain like lineups or festivals or whatever that's like quite mainstream, and they're going to, you know, attract those mainstream audiences with the commercial taste. But then there's like festivals that are going to be leaning, or like events or whatever that are going to be leaning towards like, you know, we want to broaden your horizons. So that's great, I think.
And Helen, anything to add to that?
Oh, look, I'd just say that it's what you are able to be exposed to. I know people 20, 30 years younger than me who don't listen to anything except 90s music. And it's this sense that when you get a bit older, you don't enjoy new music. But that's certainly, in my view, not true for myself and for a lot of the people I know. But it is about what you're exposed to, and it's about, as Charlie said, that refining of and broadening of what you're exposed to, and learning how to listen to music. Yeah, but I think it's in schools, for example, the arts are just subjugated to the kind of like, you know, tick this box if you, whatever. So I think there's a lot of work to do in the education system around that, and not just the formal learning, but the appreciation of art and the arts and music in particular. If you only ever listen to what your parents listen to and then nothing else, then you're quite clearly going to be, you're not expanding your listening horizons.
Well, I would like to say thank you to my new best friends, Charlie Villas and Helen Carter, for their time this afternoon or this evening. It's been total delight to hang out with you both and talk music and solve all the world problems.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you for moderating, Liz. You did a fantastic job, and great to meet you both online.
Yes.
Maybe we can see each other in Sydney or the Blue Mountains or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you to you both.
And thanks to everybody who made comments. That was great. Thank you.
Yes.
I hope you enjoy the film.
And thank you to Queer Screen for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.